I decided to wear a revealing dress to work today, but he didn't allow me to go. I still did, but now. I got so carried away with my work crush that I decided to impress him by wearing a revealing dress to work against my husband's will, but now I regret it so bad. Hey Reddit, my name is Mitchell. I am a 31-year-old civil servant working at a popular company that can't really be mentioned now based on personal reasons. Things are already complicated for me at the moment, and I intend not to make it more complicated as it is right now. I am married to a 33-year-old managing director at a marketing firm. His name is Jake, and we have been married for 6 years. What I am about to share with you all is very complicated, and I would like you guys to give me some advice on what to do. I'm currently at the verge of losing my marriage, and I really don't want that to happen. A lot happened between me and Jake that is currently leading to our divorce right now. Guys, I'm really to be blamed for everything that's happened. Jake played me dirty, and I didn't see that coming. I didn't cheat on my husband with anyone. I only flirted. When I mean cheat, I mean getting intimate with another person. My case was different, and that's what is making me so angry right now. I have never cheated on my husband. I didn't cheat on my husband, but he decided to file for a divorce and deal with me because of a little flirting I did with my colleague at work. Jake and I had a little argument on the dress I decided to wear to work. I bought this nice dress that I wanted to wear to work, but Jake seemed not to be comfortable with it. According to Jake, the dress was too inappropriate for me to wear because I'm a married woman, and he wasn't comfortable with me wearing it to work because it was too revealing. I was so pissed that I had to let him know that being married to him doesn't give him that audacity to tell me what and what not to wear, because I'm a full-grown adult that knows what is right and what is wrong. Besides, the dress Jake claimed to be too revealing for me wasn't that bad. He made a big deal out of nothing. The dress was a simple mini gown that revealed slight cleavage around my chest region. That was what I felt like wearing, but my husband decided to make a big deal out of it. We got into a heated fight, and it didn't end well. Anytime Jake and I argue or disagree on something, we always get to settle at the end of the day. But guys, that one is just different. I've never seen my husband being as angry as he was, and still is. The most frustrating part is that he has never spoken to me the way he did before. Of course, I didn't like his tone, and so I ignored whatever he said. The fight was so serious, and I know my husband meant every word he said to me that day, but I stood my ground and did what I wanted to. For disobeying him, Jake used that opportunity to teach me a big lesson. I was humiliated and hurt to know that my husband could do such a thing to me. I know you all would be wondering why I decided to wear that dress to work, right? Well, I had always been a loyal wife until I started crushing on my colleague Paul. Paul and I have been working in the same space for 2 years now. He is very good looking and has everything a lady would want in a man. And because of how good looking he was, most of my female colleagues always wanted to be close to him. In fact, it became a thing of competition among us ladies to be with Paul. He is not only good looking, but smart and funny. Everyone always wanted to be on Paul's team anytime there was teamwork. Yes, I had a crush on Paul. I didn't make it too obvious for my colleagues to know because I didn't want them to see me in some sort of way. They knew I was married, and I didn't want to damage my reputation. I won't lie, guys, Paul hardly noticed me. Not just me, but every lady that tries to get close to him. With the way the ladies acted anytime they were conversing with Paul, you didn't need no prophet to tell you that they liked him but couldn't show it up, because there's a policy at work that forbids staff to get into any type of romantic relationship with each other. That was the major issue that stopped most of the ladies from getting into an intimate relationship with Paul. But guys, to me that wasn't an issue. Paul hardly noticed me, and I tried all my best to not only get close to him, but for him to like me and see me as more than just his colleague. It was too hard for me at first, but I never relented. In order to get Paul's attention, I made a decision to go to his desk and offer to buy him lunch during one of the lunch breaks at work. The first few times I tried, he rejected my offer. I got angry and was so ashamed of myself after being rejected, but I still continued. Not until one day Paul accepted my offer to have lunch with me. That was because my boss assigned us to attend a meeting on his behalf. Honestly, I was not even the right person to go for that meeting in the first place. Someone else was to go, but I volunteered to go because I wanted to spend some time with Paul. When we got to the meeting, I lost all focus. I was just there thinking about Paul and thought of some crazy stuff to do with him. But all of that seemed impossible to me at that moment because my crush, Paul, was a savage guy. After a few hours, the meeting ended and we were to go back to work and give a report. Luckily for me that day, Paul and I both got hungry at the same time on our way back. Of course, that was a perfect opportunity for me to eat with Paul. We decided to have lunch together and branched out at a restaurant. Guys, because of how excited I was, I proposed to pay for the foods we ate, but Paul refused and insisted he would. After a back-forth between us, Paul agreed because of how persistent I was. After we were done eating, I paid and we left the restaurant. On our way back to work, Paul and I started a conversation that I wished never had ended. Imagine talking with someone that you have been really trying to get his attention the whole time, and then he is just right there sitting beside you and talking about some few things and laughing together. It was so lovely that day. But guys, that moment only lasted for a few minutes because Paul went back to his normal self immediately we got to work. He behaved cordially with me like he used to and went back to his normal work activities. I thought buying him lunch at that time would get his attention, but it didn't work out, and so I decided to go the extra mile. After much thought on how to get Paul's attention, I decided to put on clothes that would show some cleavage. That way, I believed I would get Paul's attention, and we would become close friends. At that time, I had no idea of the type of clothes to buy. That was when I called Sophie, my childhood friend, to help me in picking some clothes. Trust me, she's very good at that. At first, when I asked Sophie to help me with the shopping, she was confused and didn't know why I wanted it so badly. It was then I told her that I wanted to spice things up between Jake and I. Guys, if I had told her the real reason I wanted those clothes was because I wanted to be wearing them to work, Sophie wouldn't have agreed to help me out. She has been my friend for a long time now, and wouldn't want to be the one to ruin my marriage. But I had no option at that time than to lie, which I did, and she believed me. So guys, Sophie and I went to a boutique to get some nice dresses, the type that would show some cleavage and my body shape. I loved all the dresses we had picked that day, and I was so excited to wear them to work so Paul could notice me. At that time, I really liked Paul and was ready to do whatever it took to get his attention. A few days after the shopping, I started wearing some of those clothes to work, but the few ones I wore didn't give me what I wanted. Anyways, I still wore them to work, and guess what, guys? I was able to get Paul's attention at work. We started talking little by little. Everything was going so well, and I was very happy that my plans were working at that time. Anytime we got to work, Paul would come over to say hi to me. I was very happy that I got the attention I needed. Whenever it was lunchtime, Paul and I would head over to the cafeteria together. Also, we went home together during work. We started off as friends, but along the line things got heated up between us. What started as a harmless greeting turned into flirting. Paul and I flirted with each other, but we didn't spend the night together or have any intimate moments. This went on for like a month before everything changed. One morning I went to work and discovered we had a new intern at the office. This intern was a lady that was very good looking. Her name is Tina, and she is 25 years old. With Tina's presence, my friendship with Paul became threatened. Paul got distracted with Tina and didn't even notice me for a second. Tina, on the other hand, wasn't even helping matters at all. Her dressing was moderate, but yet pleasing to see. Every male staff member at the office wanted to be with Tina. She was literally the topic of discussion at the office. Even the female staff complimented her beauty because she was very beautiful. It was there I knew that I was in a lot of trouble. At that time, I was literally mad at Tina and myself. Just when I was getting Paul's attention, Tina came from nowhere to snatch him from me. I told myself that I had to act very fast before Tina would snatch Paul from me. It wasn't really like I was head over heels for Paul or anything like that. It was just the thought of being the center of attention that I liked mostly. What even got me pissed was that one day I saw Tina having lunch with Paul at the cafeteria during lunch break. I was so mad that I didn't hide how I felt that day. I went over to the table where they were seated and sat beside Paul. The moment I walked up to them and sat down, they stopped talking. It felt like I wasn't invited into their conversation, but I stayed still. Tina had this irritated look on her face. I felt that she wasn't comfortable with my presence. Paul, on the other hand, didn't know what was going on between Tina and I. He was a little bit upset that I walked in on them the way I did, but still kept his cool. The atmosphere at that time was a bit off. Tina and Paul didn't say a word to each other. Instead, Tina kept glaring at me. Despite that, I ate my lunch, and I knew how irritated Tina was watching me do that. After a few minutes, she stood up and said she wanted to leave because she had work to do, and she left. Immediately, Tina left Paul, didn't hesitate to tell me how pissed he was when I walked in on them. He told me that I should have asked them if they mind me joining them at the table instead of coming to sit down without any permission. At that moment, I knew Paul was very angry at what I did, but I didn't say a word to him. Paul got up and left. I tried calling him back, but he didn't answer me. I was so mad at myself because Paul was upset with me. But I was at the same time happy that I ruined his lunchtime with Tina. For the rest of the day at work, Paul gave me silent treatment. He didn't say a word to me before we closed for work. I even went over to his desk to tell him how sorry I was, but he ignored whatever I said to him. That day I was very restless. I got home and thought of what I would do to get Paul's attention and also for him to forgive me. Paul and I had come a long way and didn't want Tina to snatch him from me, considering the amount of effort I put into getting close to him. I know my actions sound immature, but I really had a thing for Paul, and getting his attention was important. To even make matters worse, my boss assigned Tina to me. I was given the duty of training Tina at the office since she was almost like an intern. This made Tina have full access to Paul because Paul and I were very close at the time she came. It was that way Tina and Paul started talking and were getting close to each other. Most times, Paul came over to our table just to talk with us. At first, I thought it was because of the little friendship we shared, but didn't know that he had interest in Tina and was using me as a way to get to her. I felt like Paul used me to talk to her because Tina was under my control at the office. When I noticed that Paul liked Tina, I decided to take him back because I liked him first. I know you all would say I was very petty to do that. Well, I really didn't care or think my actions through. At that time, I was very interested in Paul. Sometimes I wished he was the one I ended up with instead of my husband. So guys, after that day that Paul was really upset with me, I got back home and thought of what to do to get him back. After much thought, I couldn't come up with any better idea than to wear something that would catch his attention. I had done that in the past, and it worked. Just that those ones weren't too revealing like I wanted. My plan was to wear a coat over it so I won't get kicked out of work, but then I would take the coat off around Paul whenever we were alone. So I went into my closet to sort for something to wear. In less than 10 minutes, I was able to find what I wanted, and it was one of the clothes Sophie and I had shopped for the last time. I was really happy I could find a nice dress that suited my taste. So guys, the next morning I did my normal morning routine and prepared for work. Jake finished getting ready before I did. My husband and I had the habit of waiting for the other person to finish up, and then we left the house together. That day wasn't an exception. In fact, I had a delay in getting ready because the dress was too tight for me, so I had trouble putting it on. My husband was patient with me because he didn't know what kept me in the room for that long. So guys, when I was done putting the dress on, I did my makeup, fixed my hair, and in no time I was ready to go. When I walked over to the mirror to check myself out, guys, I was looking very beautiful. I was nervous because I felt like I was acting immature, but I gave myself a pep talk and walked out of the room to meet my husband who was waiting downstairs. I actually realized I did something very stupid halfway down the stairs. I forgot to wear the coat and just folded it in my bag, so when Jake saw me, I didn't have the coat on. I met him talking with someone on the phone, and after he was done, I apologized for keeping him waiting for that long. Then I gave him a peck on the cheek because I was nervous about the mistake I made. Jake wasn't distracted by my advances, and he asked me to turn around. I could see that had this irritated look on his face, so I asked him why he wanted me to turn around. Jake then told me to do what he had asked me before questioning him. Then I turned around for him to see me properly and then asked him if he liked my dress. Jake looked at me for a few seconds and asked me if that was the dress I planned to wear to work. I didn't know what to say, so I nodded my head, but Jake wasn't having it. I became angry and asked him what was wrong with what I had put on, but Jake replied and said everything was wrong with the dress. He told me I was married and I shouldn't be seen putting on those types of clothes that were meant to be worn inside the house. My husband also told me that he was very disappointed in me for walking into a boutique to buy the rag I wore. He went as far as saying he couldn't believe I was trying to disrespect our marriage. I got angry, so I made it clear that the fact I was married to him didn't give him that audacity to yell at me or choose the type of clothes I had to wear. Jake refused to listen and told me if I was done ranting, I had to go back the same way I had walked down and put something more appropriate to wear. He said I won't be stepping out of the house the way I was under his roof. My husband also told me that he would wait for me to change and gave me 10 minutes to do that. Jake meant every word he said, but I wasn't ready to do it. I felt so disrespected, and I asked him if it was a crime to be married. Despite my anger, Jake refused to listen to me or try to apologize for the way he spoke to me. He kept accusing me of being disrespectful and loose just because I made the decision not to change the dress. He also dated me to leave the house looking the way I did, and I told him to watch me do that. Just in that moment, Jake's phone rang and he picked it up. From his reaction after the call, it seemed like he had an emergency at work which needed his attention at that moment. After the call ended, Jake picked up his car keys and strictly instructed me to change my dress before stepping out of the house, and after that he left. When Jake left the house, I was very furious. At that moment, nothing was going to stop me from changing that dress, not even my husband, because my mind was already made up to wear it to work. I stepped out of the house and headed over to my car to leave, but my car was acting up and couldn't wait to check what was wrong because I was already late for work. I got even more angry at that moment because my husband had made a big deal over my dress just so he wouldn't drop me off at work. Everything at that moment got me angry. At some point, I wanted to skip work that day because my husband got my mood spoiled, but I still went after booking a cab. That also took a while before it arrived. My day was getting messed up before it even began. But I didn't let that happen because I was on a mission to get Paul's attention. I got to work and went over to my desk and settled down. The coat I wore was really helpful, and no one had an idea that I was wearing something that could get me fired from work underneath .at me. Just make something clear, though. It's not like I was wearing the world's most revealing dress or provoking dress. It just showed a lot of skin, and that's all. Even though I was anxious, I concentrated on my work and waited patiently for Paul's arrival. Guys, I didn't wait too long because after some time, Paul and Tina walked in together. After a few minutes, Paul came over and I asked to speak to him privately. He agreed, and so I took him somewhere private so we could talk. I took my coat off and turned around so Paul could see the dress, and he was very shocked. He didn't say anything for a while, and that made me very anxious. It was the first time in my life that I had done something like that, and even though I feel very stupid right now, at that moment I thought I was being sensible. I can't even believe that I basically threw myself at Paul just because I was kind of hungry for attention. I even went as far as hugging him, but he was very surprised because I just walked up to him and hugged him. It was an awkward hug, and I still don't know why the hell I did what I did, but it is what it is. I'm not proud of my actions, and I have realized how stupid I was, but like I said, I didn't feel this way back then. By the way, Paul eventually disengaged from the hug. At that moment, I told Paul how I felt about him. Guys, for the first time ever in my life, I confessed my feelings to a guy. Honestly, it was hard, but I did that because I like to be chased by guys, but Paul was difficult to impress, and I didn't want anyone to take him away from me. Even though I was married at that time, I didn't know what got into me that I made my feelings known to Paul. Paul stood for a minute and said it wasn't going to work because I was married, and the company is against staff having any intimate relationship. I refused to listen and promised him no one would know about us dating if he didn't tell them. Paul wasn't having it at that moment, so I went closer to him and gave him a kiss. He didn't stop me, and we kissed for a few seconds before I left. I walked back to the office like nothing had happened between us. I thought to myself that Paul not refusing the kiss meant he had accepted my proposal. I was so happy that I had finally gotten Paul back. I didn't know what got into me that I threw myself at Paul at that time. I felt like I had done something for wrong because I was still married to Jake. Well, I didn't beat myself too hard about it though. So guys, after the close of work, I went over to Paul's desk and bid him farewell before leaving. On my way back home, I felt a little bit anxious because of the way Jake and I started our morning. When I got home, I saw my husband's car parked outside. I already knew that he was home. Jake always gets back home before me every day. When I got inside, I met my husband on the couch, probably waiting for me to get back. Paul immediately walked up to me and asked why I had the audacity to leave the house even though he had instructed me to change my dress. I replied and told him I did what I did and he couldn't do anything about it. My husband got furious when I said that to him. From his reaction, I knew he wanted to give me a punch on my face, but he held back and controlled himself. At that moment, I was already scared because I knew what Jake is capable of doing whenever he was angry. But I didn't show that I was scared. I tried walking out on him, but Jake pulled me back and held my arm really hard. It was so hard that I began pleading with him to let go of me. Jake looked at me and told me he was going to teach me a lesson for disobeying him, and he let go of my arm immediately. I thought of what my husband had said, and it added to my fears. Jake was never to be joked with any time he was serious, most especially if he says anything whenever he's angry. My husband has never behaved like that to me since we have been together. I have only seen him act that way to people outside. My husband left home that day and didn't return till past 10 p.m. I got so worried and thought he was in trouble or something because he hadn't stayed outside that long before. Of course, I was still mad at him, and that was why I didn't call to check on him. If I had done that, he would think I was weak, and so I didn't. I won't lie, guys. I stayed up to see when he would come back home. When he came back, I expected him to apologize to me for the way he held my arm earlier that day. But guess what, guys? Jake didn't say a word to me. We both gave each other the silent treatment. I was mad at my husband with the way he had treated me, and instead of apologizing to me, he didn't. Few days after that, my husband still didn't say a word to me. His attitude towards me changed. I knew he was still upset with me, but I cared less. At that time, I couldn't understand the fact that my husband was angry after having the nerves to call me names and holding my arm in a very tight way. Even though I might have crossed the line with the way I responded to Jake, I was too hurt to apologize to him because I was the one being offended. My husband and I went about our normal lives. We lived like roommates that had issues with each other. I didn't know what my husband was up to at that time. He was serious when he said he was going to teach me a big lesson. But Jake not reacting to my disobedience immediately didn't mean that he had forgiven me. I underestimated his capabilities and didn't take his words seriously. At some point, my husband stopped providing for the house. We ran out of groceries and my husband never bothered to restock. Whenever he was hungry, my husband would go out to eat and then come back home, not minding if I had eaten or not. Even the household bills, Jake left it for me to cater for. Doing all of that made me spend money, and before I knew it, I was running out of cash. My account was getting empty because of the bills I was paying for. It even got to a point where I thought about asking Paul to lend me some money, but I couldn't. It was then I appreciated all that my husband was doing for the house in silence. Jake paid all the bills without asking me for any penny. I used to spend my money on whatever I liked and concluded that my husband was capable of handling everything all by himself. Guys, fending for the house all by myself took a toll on me. Not only that, I wasn't able to concentrate at work any longer. It was at that point I made a decision to apologize to my husband because I couldn't keep up with the silent treatment and the bills. Jake was out of town at that time, so I waited for a few days for him to get back. But guys, everything changed when I got to work one morning. When I arrived at work, a lot of people kept staring at me. At that moment, I wondered what was making them look at me in that way. I had dressed decently and didn't understand what was going on. Not until I stepped into the office room and found pictures of myself and Paul hugging and kissing on someone's desk. At that, I really wanted the ground to open and swallow me. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I thought maybe I was in some kind of horrible nightmare and wished to be woken up immediately. I kept asking myself who could have done it. Paul and I were so careful about our relationship. I was really embarrassed because the pictures were not pleasing to look at, but the traitor had the nerves to leave it on the desk for me to see. I was very furious and at the same time curious to know who had done that to me. While I was in that state of shock, I was summoned to my boss's office. When I got there, I met Paul, and from what I saw, I knew that we were in a lot of trouble. My boss was angry that we dared go against the company's policy and have an affair. He went as far as reading it out to us to refresh our memory if we had forgotten. I pleaded with him that it wasn't going to happen again and that we were sorry about what happened. Paul also pleaded with him, but my boss wasn't having it. My boss asked Paul and I to leave and told us that we were being suspended indefinitely. He meant every word he said and asked us out. When we got out, Paul yelled at me and told me we were in this because of me. He also told me that we were done with the relationship and threatened that he won't spare me if he loses the job at the end of the day. Paul didn't allow me to say anything, and he walked out on me. Immediately, I ran after him but didn't answer. I got to my desk and packed my stuff because we were ordered to do so. That day, I went back home feeling so ashamed of myself, and I realized I had been extremely foolish. A few days later, an email was sent to me from the office. Guys, it was a sack letter. I got sacked from work. I cried so much because that was my only source of income. I didn't know what I would tell Jake when he got back. I knew going to tell him that I got sacked from work because I had an affair with my colleague sounded stupid. The worst part was that Jake took forever to return, and I was impatient and anxious. When my husband got back, I didn't wait for him to settle down properly. I told him how sorry I was and asked him to forgive me for disobeying him the other day. I also told him that I got sacked from work because of the way I dressed that day. I lied that it was because of the dress, and he didn't say anything to me. The next morning, when Jake was getting dressed to go to work, I asked him to look for a job for me and told him that I want to find something to do and not stay at home doing nothing. For a few seconds, Jake didn't say a word to me. Just when he was about to step out of the house, Jake handed some papers to me. I asked him what it was, and he said there were some job options and that I should go through them to contact any company I would like to work with. I was very happy and excited to go through the papers, only for me to find out that they were divorce papers. Immediately, I got angry and asked Jake if it was a joke to him and asked if he was being sarcastic. My husband told me that he was going to work, and when he got back, he didn't want to see me in the house, and then he left. Everything was like a movie to him at that moment, and I still can't believe everything that happened. I need help because I really do not want a divorce. Update. Hey, Reddit. It's been a while since I last posted. I appreciate all the comments, even though some of you seem to be on Jake's side. Well, my husband and I have gone our separate ways. I signed the divorce papers and handed them over to him. A lot happened within the past few weeks, but I was able to find out exactly what happened. Guys, after the back and forth we had with my dressing, Jake had me watched. He was able to come and ask my colleagues if I was doing anything unusual at work. My colleagues knew I was married, and Jake had been at the company a few times, so they recognized him. Tina ran her stupid mouth to him and exposed me. I also found out that Tina was the one who passed those pictures of Paul and I to him. When she got to know that I was married, she decided to team up with Jake. She even spilled everything about my friendship with Paul. Tina told me everything after she learned that my husband and I were no longer together. Of course, she didn't say it to me for my own interest. She came over to mock me because I lost both my marriage and Paul, who I was shamelessly throwing myself at. Paul, on the other hand, didn't speak to me after the day we were both suspended. I still haven't heard from him and have no idea if he was also sacked. Honestly, at this point, I really want to get my life back together. The lesson my husband said he was going to teach me really broke me hard. He made sure I lost the most important thing that was earning me money. He's divorcing me, and to top it all, he exposed me in front of my colleagues and made me make a fool of myself when I told him I was sacked from work because of the dress I wore. I didn't know that he was behind everything and teamed up with Tina to get back at me. I have learned my lessons, and I guess learned it the hard way.